Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at Lamden's channel. I am Mike, your interviewer. We're sitting here with Stuart Farmer, the founder and project lead at Lamden. Just want to let you guys know what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be running through company updates, maybe touch on the industry a little bit, answer any questions you guys got for us, and of course, introduce members of the team. So, Stuart, you're first up. Tell us how you're doing today. Are you ready to get into your past?
I'm doing great. Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. So first and foremost, tell me about your educational experience, kind of how you got to where you are today, like on a motivational level. Like what makes you like this kind of stuff?
I guess growing up, I was always kind of drawn towards computers, and I was, fortunate enough to be in like education systems where there was a progressive approach towards computers. So, really young, like first grade, starting at first grade, we were put on computers to type, and then we were also put on computers to learn how to program. And so that really solidified, I think, a lot of the base of what I like to do. And for whatever reason, I really globbed onto the programming bit. I think a lot of people, I think most people hated typing. I hated typing. And then I think a lot of people probably hated the programming too, but that really stuck with me. I was really into it. And that was just like started with kind of a graphical, it's called Logo. So like a graphical language. And then from there, my friends and I went to computer camp and we learned like basic. And then after that, his dad was like, worked at Microsoft. It was so cool. So then we started learning like C++, C Sharp. Just, I was super into that stuff. And so I guess from a young age, that solidified this base. And then from there, I kind of got a huge affinity towards like startups and businesses. And so when I went to college, what I really wanted to do was start my own business. And I didn't get a computer science degree. I got a communication degree, which gave me a lot of free time to explore some of the offices there. So I went to the Ohio State University, and it's a large enough university to have kind of these specialized offices. And one of the ones that they had, it's no longer there anymore. It's called the Technology Commercialization Office. And it was like an entrepreneurship office where all these researchers and postgrads who came up with research could come and pitch to the university for funding, essentially. And it was my job to create like the minimum viable product, usually a mobile application. I was working on the iOS section. And from there, I met my first business partner who was like the back end guy or like the web guy. So he did Ruby, I did like Objective-C. And we started just doing that, but not in the confines of the Ohio State, but in the confines of the entire like area of Columbus. So we worked with like an accelerator or like an investment firm that accelerated these ventures. We built out a lot of applications. And then I got that system kind of up and running and had some free time. That's when, this is like back in 2017, ICOs, Ethereum, all of this stuff was happening.
Wild.
Yeah, yeah. This time around, it's like NFTs, play to earns, but a similar sort of like thing was happening. And because I was around programming and stuff like that, to me, like Bitcoin, of course I knew about Bitcoin. That was like something cool that you could go and buy like drugs online for and stuff like that. But it hit a critical point when it hit $1,000 that I started to take it really seriously. And that's when I started to investigate. And so that's the introduction to kind of how the product was.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So let's go back into it a little bit deeper real quick. And you were talking about getting into programming as a kid, and you gave credit to your school system for actually helping you get to that point. And something I'd always thought about, and maybe it's an idea you would resonate with as well, is now in this modern world, on top of one of the things we kind of fail at in the United States is teaching kids more than one language. Well, at this point, I'm kind of the opinion they should also learn a programming language too while growing up as a part of the regular curriculum. How do you feel about that? And which language do you think is the best?
I 1,000% agree. And maybe this is a biased answer, but I would choose Python because it has, it's a multi-paradigm language. It has things like part of the standard kit. It has actually an implementation of Logo, which is the thing that I learned when I was a kid. And so you can start from like a graphical sense. It teaches you all the basics of programming. And from there, it's multi-use. So you can branch out into back-end web development or even front-end web development with like Django and these frameworks. Um, and then you can add on if you want to get a little bit deeper into something like that's compiled, usually like a statically typed language, which is harder for a lot of people to do. So
Yeah, fair enough.
that
And,
would be
I feel like kids these days have an even harder time because at least when I was a kid, there was MySpace where you had to do some
yeah.
basic programming to make it look nice. Now it's all done for you. But Stu, I digress a little too far. Getting back to it and tying Python into it. Tell me then the story of Lamden, how that came to be, and then tell me how Python became the language you decided to build all this off of.
Yeah, sure. So like kind of going back then to where this idea came from. Um, my job as someone who was developing the minimum viable product for a startup was what's the slimmest thing that's going to get you revenue, right? And so what that usually was taking a whole bunch of requirements, boiling them down, going to the tech open source community or like grabbing things off the shelf like software as a service, reading these technologies, getting kind of up to speed and being like, all right, cool, let's implement. So usually when you're doing that, most, if not all, it's advantageous for you to do this as a tech company who's offering like a library, to have a standard way that you do things, to follow kind of industry standards. So there's things like RESTful APIs, there's like documentation standards. And so someone like me can come around, pick up the software and say, okay, cool. Oh, and I can like pay for the license and stuff like that. So things like Stripe, really good at it, and Stripe's a massive business now. Plaid is another one that's massive. Their success story is that. So when I approached building something in Ethereum, I figured, all right, great, off the shelf. Let's go and look at how they kind of structure it. And it's not like that at all. You really have to take a step back and realize that they've reinvented the wheel. And that's part of the charm or the mysticism of blockchain.
Fair.
Yeah. Or that's kind of what I think a lot of people who are not in the space see it as. They're like, oh, well, this is the new future. Of course, things are not the same as they were. But for someone like me who's just trying to get a job done, it's kind of, it's unacceptable. So when I was looking at this stuff to build Ethereum on, I was getting frustrated. And there was this huge need to build developer tools for, Ethereum or whatever. And I was just getting more and more into Python at that point. And so it became an easy win where it was like Python as a language kind of does this as well, where it makes things very simple to pick up. So you can move fast, you can build a prototype of an application and refine it later. Why don't we couple these two concepts together and try to make something new?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And we can dive deeper into the Python versus Solidity stuff further down the road. But so far, what have been really the struggles then of you trying to implement this idea with Python as opposed to sticking with Solidity?
Yeah, so back when we built the software, Solidity and Ethereum were really it was the only smart contract system. So things like Tron came out, which is just a kind of like a clone of that. But really, there were not a lot of new smart contracting systems that existed. Neo came out around that time, and they created their own virtual machine, right? And so they kind of saw what Ethereum did and said, well, if Ethereum made their own virtual machine, we're going to make our own virtual machine. And I think a lot of other chains have either forked the EVM or made their own virtual machine. So something like Solana nowadays is completely different. I wish I knew some more off the top of my head. I know
There's
like
been so many, man. EOS.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
There's been so many.
Yeah.
There's been a lot
And
of
so
so-called Ethereum kills, which has not been the way to actually try to implement any of these. That was a terrible marketing strategy. A lot of people would try to do is go for that status. Because the fact of the matter is the smart contracts can all exist independently of each other or intermix with each other as well. So I think that was kind of more the proper approach. And a lot of these like Tron, I think were largely marketing. We're just a lot of marketing.
Yes.
But I digress. That's my own personal opinion. So back to you real quick. Talk to me about choosing the title as project lead. That's officially what you are.
Sure.
And I'm curious what that entails and why you chose that title specifically.
Yeah, that's somewhat recent because I think as someone who's been around blockchain and Bitcoin and stuff very, very early on, like the first Bitcoin I bought was back in 2012 off a MoneyGram phone in a CVS from BitInstant. So this is before Coinbase even existed, you know.
Yeah.
It wasn't really, there was no CEO of Bitcoin. And so this whole concept of CEO of a blockchain project is kind of an oxymoron to me. And I put that role there as to say, like, look, this is kind of where the industry is going, and a lot of projects need nowadays some sort of CEO or some sort of role for people to take them seriously. But then it became a point where I realized that my ethos is more in those kind of older school days with like uTorrent and these other distributed systems that were coming about, where it felt more appropriate to put myself as a project lead. And then when we look at, say, the technology and leading the project and keeping things kind of pure to a degree like that, that's where I fit. And something where I think I would just have a lot of people coming to me and saying like, oh, you're not a CEO because you don't do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And where I think then there's no issue with the project doing that. But I wanted just to make clear, like, look, I'm a project lead. I want to open up the tent so that more community members kind of rise up and get power from this project. There's no reason for there to be a central figurehead where everyone's kind of pointing at and saying like, well, it's your responsibility here. We need to all kind of come together. And so that requires me to just be more of a project lead. And I think naturally that's my inclination anyways. And so that was kind of the structure of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, again, going back to the traditional way the Bitcoin and so on really caught on is all community led, almost entirely community led. And there's been a recent movement of centralization might not be the right word to say, institutionalization of a lot of these projects, right? Where you then have a traditional team, and essentially what it is applying traditional business concepts to the blockchain when there are some ideas that kind of clash in general in terms of the actual, like what you're going for. As you said, project lead fits more the standard crypto ideal, right? And so that makes perfect sense. I think that's a really good explanation. So Stu, I think you've walked people through a lot of the stuff here that introduces people to you, your entrepreneurial background, your programming background, and it was a great introduction. Now I do implore everybody to continue to ask questions. If you guys have any questions, send some over. But Stu, is there anything else about yourself that you want to add before we go?
Oh, geez. I don't know. No, I don't think so. I'm never like one
No
to really
horoscopes.
horoscopes. No, I don't think so.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That's
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. My girlfriend is too, but we won't go there.
Okay.
Anyway, Stu, thank you so much for joining today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will have a deeper dive coming up soon. Ask any questions. We will happily answer them. But for now, Stu, have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.